I watched through the baby monitor as my husband kissed another woman in our daughter's nursery. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek had installed that monitor himself, insisting on the most expensive model with crystal-clear night vision. Now it was recording evidence I'd never wanted to see. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. She won't suspect anything, Derek whispered, his hand trailing down the woman's back. Vanessa's too busy playing housewife to notice what's happening under her own roof. The woman, I recognized her now as Simone, his new business associate, laughed softly. And after the divorce? Won't she come after your assets? Derek's chuckle made my stomach turn. What assets? Everything's in my name. The house, the cars, the investment accounts she thinks we share. My lawyer's already confirmed. She'll get the legal minimum. Maybe enough for a studio apartment if she's lucky. Poor thing, Simone cooed, though her voice dripped with anything but sympathy. What will she do? I heard she hasn't worked in years. 6 years, Derek confirmed, adjusting his tie. Not since Emma was born. She gave up her little marketing job to stay home. No recent work history, no connections, no leverage. She'll be lucky to land a receptionist position somewhere. I sat in the darkness of my home office, my laptop screen casting a pale glow across my face. The baby monitor rested on my desk beside a glass of wine I hadn't touched. My hands were remarkably steady as I opened my secure banking portal. Not the joint checking account Derek thought was our only financial lifeline, but something else entirely. The screen loaded, displaying a number that would make Derek's carefully hidden accounts look like pocket change. $47.3 million, spread across 12 offshore accounts in 5 different countries. And that was just the liquid assets. The property holdings, the investment portfolios, the trusts, those added another $60 million to the total. She signed a prenup, Derek continued, his voice crackling through the monitor's speaker. I made sure of that before Emma was born. Convinced her it was just a formality, that it would protect us both. She barely read it. He was right about that last part. I hadn't read it carefully, because I'd already had 3 lawyers review it before I signed, making sure it contained exactly the clauses I needed. The prenup Derek thought was his insurance policy was actually mine. Every loophole I'd need was buried in the legal jargon, invisible to his overconfident eyes. When are you filing? Simone asked. Next month. I'm waiting until after the company acquisition goes through. Once I get that promotion to CFO, I'll have the salary to support the lifestyle I want. With you. I almost laughed. The acquisition he was referring to, Titanium Solutions merging with Westbridge Financial, was dead in the water. I should know. I'd killed it myself 3 days ago with a single phone call to Westbridge's actual CFO, who happened to owe me a favor from a deal I'd structured for him in 2019. Derek had no idea that promotion was never coming. My phone buzzed silently on the desk. A message from my attorney, Jonathan Reeves. Documents ready for your review. Tomorrow, 9 a.m.? I typed back. Perfect. Bring the forensic accountant's report too. The baby monitor crackled again. I should go, Derek said. She thinks I'm at the gym. Same time Thursday? Simone's voice held a note of anticipation. Can't. Thursday's Emma's dance recital. Have to play the devoted father. Saturday then. Tell her you have a conference. Already did. I closed the laptop as I heard the front door open downstairs. My hands moved automatically, shutting down the secure banking portal and pulling up a recipe website. the domestic goddess researching dinner ideas. Exactly what Derek expected to find. "Vanessa?" His voice echoed through the house. "I'm home." I took a breath, composing my face into the soft, welcoming expression I'd perfected over 6 years of marriage. The same expression I'd worn while building an empire he knew nothing about. "In the office, honey," I called back, my voice bright and unsuspecting. "Just looking up something for dinner tomorrow." His footsteps on the stairs were heavy, confident. The walk of a man who thought he held all the cards. He appeared in the doorway, gym bag slung over his shoulder, hair artfully disheveled to sell the exercise excuse. "How was your workout?" I asked, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Brutal. Anderson pushed us hard today." The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly. "I'm going to shower. Did Emma go down okay?" "Like an angel. She asked for you, though." A flicker of something, guilt perhaps, crossed his face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I'll check on her after I clean up." He left, and I waited until I heard the shower running before opening my laptop again. But this time, I pulled up something different. A detailed timeline I'd been maintaining for the past 4 months, ever since I'd first suspected something was wrong. It had started small. The way he'd begun working later, the sudden increase in business trips, the new attention to his appearance. I'd known the signs. After all, I'd watched my mother navigate 3 divorces before she finally learned to protect herself financially. Those painful lessons had shaped everything I became. What Derek didn't know, what no one knew except my attorney and my financial advisor, was that I'd never actually stopped working. Not really. 6 years ago, when I told Derek I was giving up my marketing position to stay home with Emma, I'd been telling a half-truth. I had left my corporate job, yes, but I'd also been laying the groundwork for something much bigger. It started with a single consulting client, a pharmaceutical startup that needed someone to navigate a complex international market entry. I'd taken the contract under an LLC I'd established before Emma was born, carefully structured to keep my involvement anonymous. That one project led to another, then another. Within 2 years, I had 15 clients. Within 4, I'd built a consulting empire that operated entirely behind the scenes. My business, Meridian Strategic Advisors, never had my name attached to it publicly. I worked through a network of trusted associates who fronted client meetings while I handled strategy from home. Every email went through encrypted servers. Every contract was signed by my business manager. Every payment went into accounts Derek couldn't access or even imagine existed. The irony was delicious. While Derek went to his office every day, managing other people's money as a financial advisor, I was structuring multi-million-dollar deals from our home office, wearing yoga pants and with our daughter's toys scattered at my feet. "Vanessa?" Derek's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He stood in the doorway again, this time in fresh clothes, his hair damp. "You okay? You seemed distracted." I smiled, closing the laptop. "Just tired. Emma was up twice last night with bad dreams. You should sleep in tomorrow. I can take her to preschool before work." "That's sweet. But you have that early meeting, remember?" His eyes shifted slightly, the tell I'd learned to recognize. "Right. The meeting. Can't miss that." There was no meeting. I knew his calendar better than he thought. Tomorrow at 8, he'd be at the Four Seasons having breakfast with Simone. I knew because I'd hacked his email 3 months ago, a skill I'd picked up from a cybersecurity consultant who owed me a favor after I'd helped her company secure funding. "Why don't you go relax?" I suggested. "I'll bring you some tea." "You're the best," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of my head. The gesture felt mechanical, performative. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You're about to find out," I thought, but smiled instead. "Go on, I'll be right there." After he left, I pulled out my phone and opened a secure messaging app. My fingers flew across the screen. Need to move the timeline up. He's planning to file next month. I want to file first. The response from Jonathan came within seconds. "How soon?" 2 weeks. Ambitious. But we can make it work. I'll accelerate everything. I set the phone down and finally took a sip of the wine. It had gone slightly warm, but I barely noticed. My mind was already racing through the logistics, the strategy, the careful choreography of what was to come. Derek thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. But the truth was, I'd been playing three-dimensional chess while he was still trying to figure out which piece was the king. The next morning, I woke before dawn, careful not to disturb Derek as I slipped out of bed. Emma would be up soon, and I had calls to make before she started her cheerful morning routine. In my office, I dialed the first number from memory. It rang twice before a crisp British accent answered. "Mrs. Hartley, I wondered when you'd be calling." "Good morning, Patricia." Patricia Whitmore was my forensic accountant. A brilliant woman who'd helped me hide assets from more sophisticated searches than anything Derek could mount. "I need a complete audit of Derek's accounts. Everything. The ones I know about, and the ones he thinks are hidden." "I already have most of it," she replied. "When you mentioned your concerns last month, I took the liberty of doing some preliminary investigation. Your husband has been quite busy." "How bad is it?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He's been siphoning money from your joint accounts for 18 months. Small amounts at first, gradually increasing. Currently, he's moved approximately $340,000 into accounts you don't have access to. He's also taken out a line of credit against the house. $200,000, which he's been using to fund various expenditures. My jaw tightened. The house was in both our names, but I'd provided the entire down payment from my personal funds. Money I'd made before we married. Can you trace where it's going? Some of it's obvious. Expensive hotels, jewelry, restaurants. But there's more. He's been investing in a startup, a tech company called Novatech Solutions. Ring any bells? It did. That's Simone's company. Correct. He's put $150,000 into it over the past year. On paper, he's a silent partner. But in reality? In reality, the company's burning through cash with no viable product. I'd give it 6 months before it collapses. Your husband is essentially funding his mistress's failing business. I closed my eyes, calculating. Can we freeze his access to the joint accounts? Not yet. We need to wait until you file. Otherwise, it tips him off. But I've already established monitoring protocols. If he tries to move any large sums, we'll know immediately. Good. And the offshore accounts he doesn't know about? They're secure? Absolutely. I've added additional layers of protection this week. Even if he hired someone like me, they'd never find them. The ownership structure is too complex, too many shell companies and international trusts. You're completely protected. After I hung up with Patricia, I made 2 more calls. The first was to my real estate attorney, confirming that the 3 properties I'd purchased under my LLC were properly documented and titled. The second was to my investment advisor, verifying that my stock portfolio, currently valued at just over $20 million, was in accounts Derek had no legal access to. By the time Emma padded into my office in her princess pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes, I'd secured every asset that mattered. "Mommy, I'm hungry." I scooped her up, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "How about we make pancakes? With chocolate chips?" "With chocolate chips," I confirmed, carrying her toward the kitchen. Derek was already there, suited up for work, scrolling through his phone with a coffee in hand. He looked up as we entered, his face shifting into the warm smile he reserved for Emma. "There's my princess. Good morning, sweetheart." Emma wiggled out of my arms and ran to him. "Daddy, Mommy's making chocolate chip pancakes." "Lucky girl," he said, kissing her forehead. His eyes met mine over her head. "I might be late tonight. Henderson wants to go over some client portfolios." Another lie. Henderson was Derek's boss, and according to the office calendar I'd hacked, he was leaving at 3 today for his grandson's birthday party. "No problem," I said, pulling out the mixing bowl. "Emma and I will have a girls' night. Maybe we'll paint our nails." "Sounds perfect." He set Emma down and grabbed his briefcase. "I'll text you if I'm going to be later than 8. He wouldn't text. He'd be at Simone's apartment until midnight, the way he'd been every Tuesday for the past 3 months. I knew because I'd hired a private investigator, not because I needed proof for myself, but because I needed documentation for court. As the door closed behind him, Emma climbed onto a kitchen stool to help me cook. "Mommy, why does Daddy work so much?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "He's always leaving. Even when he's here, he's on his phone." Her little face scrunched up in thought. "Melissa's daddy is home more. And her mommy works too." I cracked an egg into the bowl, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups have different kinds of jobs. Daddy's job means he has to be away sometimes. "What's your job, Mommy?" I paused, the whisk suspended over the batter. In Derek's version of our story, I didn't have a job. I was just the stay-at-home mom who depended on him entirely. But Emma deserved better than that fiction. "My job is making sure our family is taken care of," I said, which was true enough. "And helping people solve problems." "Like a superhero?" I smiled, resuming my whisking. "Something like that." As the pancakes cooked, my phone buzzed with an email from Jonathan. The subject line read, "Preliminary filing documents. Confidential." I didn't open it in front of Emma, but I felt a surge of something like relief. The wheels were in motion now. There was no turning back. After breakfast, I dropped Emma at preschool, her little backpack bouncing as she skipped toward the building, and drove to Jonathan's office in the financial district. His suite occupied the top floor of a glass building that overlooked the harbor, the kind of expensive real estate that broadcasts success. "Vanessa," he greeted me, rising from behind an enormous mahogany desk. Jonathan was in his 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with a reputation for crushing opponents in divorce court. "Thank you for coming in. Coffee?" "Please." He poured from a French press while I settled into the leather chair across from him. The coffee was excellent, rich and smooth. Unlike the grocery store brand Derek insisted was just as good as the premium beans I used to buy before I learned to hide my preferences. "Let's get right to it," Jonathan said, opening a thick folder. "I've reviewed the prenup you signed 6 years ago. Derek's attorney was either incompetent or didn't anticipate your level of financial sophistication." "How bad is it for him?" "The prenup states that any assets acquired before the marriage remain separate property. It also states that income earned during the marriage is considered joint property, unless it can be proven to be kept in separate accounts with explicit documentation. And my consulting business started before Emma was born, before the prenup. Exactly. And you've meticulously documented every dollar earned through Meridian Strategic Advisors as going into separate accounts. Derek has no claim to any of it. I felt a weight lift from my chest. So, the house? Trickier. It's in both names, but you provided the down payment, $400,000 from your pre-marriage accounts. That gives you a significant equity stake. Combined with the line of credit he took out without your knowledge, which violates the marital agreement to make joint financial decisions, I believe we can make a strong case for you to receive the house entirely. And custody of Emma? Jonathan's expression grew serious. That's where we need to be strategic. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, which means his affair doesn't directly impact custody. However, the evidence you've gathered, the financial deception, the way he's been diverting marital assets, paints a picture of someone who prioritizes himself over his family. He pulled out a series of photographs from another folder. My private investigator's work. Derek and Simone at romantic dinners, entering hotels together, kissing in parking garages. Timestamps on each one. We also have this, Jonathan continued, producing a printed transcript. You mentioned you recorded their conversation in the nursery. Is that legal? In Washington, you're allowed to record conversations in your own home, especially where you have a reasonable expectation of privacy for your child. The fact that he brought his affair partner into your daughter's room actually strengthens your case. It shows poor judgment regarding Emma's well-being. I scanned the transcript, seeing Derek's words laid out in black and white. The casual cruelty of his plan, the confidence that I'd be left with nothing. Seeing it typed out made it somehow more real, more painful. There's something else, Jonathan said quietly. The money he's invested in Simone's company, Novatech Solutions. Patricia's forensic analysis suggests it's not just a bad investment. There may be fraud involved. My head snapped up. What kind of fraud? The company's filing documents don't match their actual operations. They've claimed certain patents and intellectual property that don't appear to exist. They've also received investment based on projected contracts that never materialized. Patricia thinks Simone might be running an elaborate scam, and your husband has implicated himself by investing marital assets into it. Could he face criminal charges? Possibly, but that's not our primary concern right now. Our concern is protecting you and Emma. If Derek's involved in fraud, even unknowingly, we need to ensure you're completely separated from any liability. Jonathan walked me through the filing strategy for the next hour. We would file on a Friday afternoon, giving us the weekend to implement protective measures before Derek could respond. We'd request immediate temporary orders, exclusive use of the marital home, temporary custody of Emma, and freezing of all joint accounts. He's going to be blindsided, Jonathan said. Men like Derek, they don't see it coming. He's so convinced of his own cleverness that he won't realize you've outmaneuvered him until it's too late. Good, I said, and meant it. As I drove home from Jonathan's office, my phone rang through the car's speakers. An unlisted number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me hit the button. Mrs. Hartley? A woman's voice, young and uncertain. Yes? My name is Rebecca Lynn. I'm an accountant at Henderson Financial, where your husband works. I pulled into a shopping center parking lot, my heart rate picking up. What can I do for you, Rebecca? I don't know if I should be calling. This could cost me my job, but I've been watching what's happening, and I can't stay quiet anymore. What's happening? Your husband has been misappropriating client funds. Not large amounts. He's too smart for that. but consistent withdrawals from accounts where the clients are elderly or not closely monitoring their portfolios. He's been moving money through shell accounts and then into his personal investments. I felt cold. How long has this been going on? At least a year, maybe longer. I only started noticing it 6 months ago. I tried to bring it up with my supervisor, but he told me to mind my own business. Said Derek was a top performer, and I was probably mistaken. Why are you telling me this? A long pause. Because my grandmother is one of his clients. She's 87, and she trusts him completely. Last month, she mentioned that her account balance seemed lower than she expected, but Derek convinced her she was misremembering. I pulled her records. He's taken $30,000 from her over the past year. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Do you have documentation? Copies of everything. I know I could get in trouble, but this is wrong. These are people's retirement savings, their life's work. And I think he's going to get caught soon. The firm is getting audited next quarter. When they find out, everyone's going to be implicated, including people who had nothing to do with it. Rebecca, can you send me those documents? Encrypted, to a secure email? Yes, but Mrs. Hartley, I need you to promise me something. When this comes out, and it will, please don't let your husband take down the whole firm. There are good people there. People with families who had no idea what he was doing. I promise. Send me everything you have. After we hung up, I sat in the parking lot for a long moment, processing. Derek wasn't just cheating on me and planning to leave me destitute. He was stealing from elderly clients, one of whom was the grandmother of the woman who'd just called me. The man I'd married, or thought I'd married, didn't exist. Maybe he never had. My phone buzzed again. A message from my mother. Lunch this week? Want to see Emma? I smiled despite everything. My mother, the woman who'd taught me through 3 painful divorces that financial independence wasn't optional. It was survival. I typed back, Thursday? I have news. Her response was immediate. Is it finally happening? My mother had been the only person besides my attorneys who knew about my suspicions regarding Derek. She'd been the one to recommend Patricia, her own forensic accountant from her last divorce. She'd also been the one to tell me to start documenting everything the moment I felt something was off. Soon, I replied. Very soon. That evening, Derek came home at 9:47 p.m., exactly when he'd been arriving every Tuesday for months. His hair was shower fresh, his shirt crisp, obviously changed after leaving Simone's apartment. Sorry I'm so late, he said, finding me in the living room with a book. Henderson and I ended up going over a lot more than expected. No worries, I said, not looking up from my page. Emma's been asleep since 8. She made you a picture at school. It's on the fridge. Something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe, or the faint recognition that he was missing these small moments of his daughter's life for his affair. But he just nodded. I'll look at it in the morning. I'm beat. Derek? I called as he headed for the stairs. He turned. Yeah? Do you remember when we first started dating? You told me you'd always be honest with me. That honesty was the foundation of everything. His face went carefully neutral. Of course I remember. Good, I said, returning to my book. I just wanted to make sure you remembered saying that. He stood there for another moment, uncertain, then continued up the stairs. After I heard the bedroom door close, I opened my laptop and found the encrypted email from Rebecca. The documentation was extensive. Spreadsheets showing the pattern of withdrawals, account statements with unexplained transfers, even some internal messages where Derek had instructed her supervisor to fix discrepancies without properly documenting them. I forwarded everything to Jonathan with a note. This changes things. He's not just divorcing me. He might be going to prison. Jonathan's response came 30 minutes later. This is bigger than we thought. I'm bringing in a criminal attorney to consult. We need to be very careful about how we proceed. If the authorities get involved before we file, your divorce could be delayed for years. So what do? We move faster. Can you be ready to file by Friday? I looked at the calendar. Today was Tuesday. That gave me 3 days. Yes, I typed. Let's do it. The next 72 hours were a blur of preparation. I met with Jonathan twice more, signed documents, prepared financial statements. I had difficult conversations with my mother about what would come next, about how Emma would handle everything. I went through the house room by room, cataloging what was mine, what was Derek's, what we'd bought together. I also hired a second private investigator to document Derek's movements around the clock. I needed to know exactly where he was when I filed. Needed to ensure he wouldn't be able to hide assets or destroy evidence before the temporary orders were in place. Through it all, I maintained perfect normalcy at home. I cooked Derek's favorite meals. I smiled and laughed at his stories from work. Lies, all lies. I asked him about his day and pretended to believe his explanations for why he'd be gone this weekend. A conference that didn't exist. On Thursday morning, I had lunch with my mother at a quiet bistro downtown. She looked at me across the table, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You're really doing this," she said. It wasn't a question. "Friday afternoon, 3 p.m. How do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. Relieved, mostly. Sad for Emma. Angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. "Don't do that," my mother said firmly. "Don't blame yourself for trusting someone you loved. That's on him, not you. You tried to warn me. When we got engaged, I said he seemed too interested in your family's money. And you told me, correctly, that I was projecting my own experiences onto your relationship. You were right to give him a chance." She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "But you were also smart enough to protect yourself. Everything you built in secret. Everything you earned separately. When he leaves, he's taking nothing of yours except the memories. He's taking 6 years of my life. No, sweetheart. He's giving you the rest of your life. There's a difference." On Thursday night, Derek packed for his fake conference. I watched from the bedroom doorway as he carefully selected shirts and pants, shoes and ties. He was whistling softly, happy. "You seem excited about this conference," I observed. "Should be good. Anderson from our Seattle office is presenting some interesting portfolio strategies." The lie flowed so easily. "I might get some ideas I can use with my own clients." "Will you call Emma to say goodnight?" "Of course. Every night." He zipped the suitcase and turned to me. "You're amazing, you know that? Holding down the fort while I'm away, taking care of Emma. I don't say it enough, but I appreciate everything you do." The words should have meant something. Once they would have. Now they just felt like another layer of deception, carefully applied to keep me compliant and unsuspecting. "It's what partners do," I said. "We take care of each other." "Exactly." He kissed me, brief, perfunctory, and grabbed his suitcase. "I'll be home Sunday evening. Call if you need anything." "Have a great conference." I watched from the window as he loaded his car and drove away. Not toward the airport, but toward Simone's apartment in the Pearl District. My private investigator sent me a photo 30 minutes later. Derek's car in her parking garage, exactly where we knew it would be. I slept surprisingly well that night. Emma crawled into bed with me around midnight, claiming she'd had a bad dream. I held her close, stroking her hair, and thought about what tomorrow would bring. "Mommy?" she whispered, half asleep. "Are you and Daddy going to get divorced?" My hand stilled. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because Sophia's parents got divorced. She said they stopped sleeping in the same bed first." I hadn't realized Emma had noticed that Derek had started using the guest room twice a week, claiming his snoring was keeping me awake. "Sometimes grown-ups need their own space," I said carefully. "It doesn't always mean divorce." "But sometimes it does?" "Sometimes." She was quiet for a long moment. "If you and Daddy get divorced, will I still see him?" "Of course, baby. No matter what happens between your daddy and me, we both love you very much. That will never change." "Okay," she said, and her breathing evened out as she drifted back to sleep. I lay awake for a long time after, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the conversation I'd have with Emma in the coming weeks. She deserved better than a father who chose his affair over his family. But she also deserved to maintain a relationship with him if he was willing to step up. That was something we'd have to figure out together. Friday morning arrived bright and clear. I took Emma to preschool as usual, kissing her goodbye and promising to pick her up at 3:30. Then I drove to Jonathan's office for what he called our final briefing. "Everything's ready," he said, spreading documents across the conference table. "The filing is scheduled for 3 p.m. The moment we submit, the court will issue temporary orders freezing all joint accounts and granting you exclusive use of the marital home. By the time Derek finds out, which will be when the process server locates him, you and Emma will be secure. And if he tries to access the accounts before that, Patricia's monitoring them in real time. If even a dollar moves, we'll know instantly and can push the filing up to this morning." "What about Emma? What's the custody arrangement? Initially?" "You'll have primary custody pending a full hearing. Derek will have supervised visitation once a week until we can establish a more permanent schedule. Given the evidence we have of his affair, his financial mismanagement, and the fact that he brought his mistress into Emma's space, the court will want to move carefully." I nodded, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. "And the criminal charges? Rebecca's evidence?" "That's being handled separately. I've put her in touch with a friend at the State Attorney General's office. They're opening an investigation into Henderson Financial's practices. But we're keeping your divorce separate from that as much as possible. You're not responsible for Derek's professional choices. Even though he used marital assets to fund a potentially fraudulent company? That actually works in your favor. We're arguing that he violated the prenup's clauses about joint financial decisions and asset protection. Every dollar he put into Novatech is a dollar he owes back to the marital estate." At 2:45 p.m., I sat in Jonathan's office watching the clock. Emma was still at preschool. My mother was on standby to pick her up if needed. The process server was waiting near Simone's apartment building, ready to deliver the papers as soon as the filing went through. At 2:57, Jonathan's paralegal came in with a tablet. "Everything's queued up. Just waiting for your final approval." I looked at the screen showing the petition for dissolution of marriage. My name, Derek's name, Emma's name. 6 years of marriage reduced to legal language and numbered paragraphs. "Do it," I said. She tapped the screen. Filed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Jonathan's phone started ringing. His contact at the courthouse. confirming receipt, and issuing the temporary orders. My own phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. All joint accounts frozen effective immediately. "It's done," Jonathan said, looking up from his phone. "The process server is moving in now." I waited, my heart pounding, until another message came through. This one from the private investigator. "Papers delivered." Subject appeared shocked. Female companion asked him to leave immediately. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd holding. "Vanessa," Jonathan said gently, "you need to get home. Change the locks immediately. Our locksmith is already en route. Derek will probably try to come to the house once he processes what's happening." I stood on shaking legs. "Thank you, Jonathan. For everything." "We're just getting started," he said, "but you've done the hard part. Everything else is just paperwork and negotiation." The drive home felt surreal. I kept expecting to feel something: triumph, relief, grief. But instead I felt oddly numb, disconnected from the enormity of what I'd just set in motion. The locksmith was already there when I arrived, his van parked in my driveway. I let him in and watched as he efficiently changed every lock in the house. Front, door, back door, garage, everything. "Your attorney said you might need the security system updated too," he said. "Change the codes, add some cameras?" "Yes, everything." While he worked, I walked through the house one more time, seeing it differently now. This was my house, mine and Emma's. Derek had no claim to it anymore, no right to be here. I was in Emma's room when my phone rang. Derek's number. I let it go to voicemail. Immediately, he called again. And again. After the 5th call, I answered. "Hello? What the hell did you do?" His voice was shaking with rage. "I just got served with divorce papers, in front of Simone. What is this, Vanessa?" "It's exactly what it says it is, Derek. I'm divorcing you." "You can't do this. You don't have the money to—" "Actually, I do. And significantly more than you realize." Silence. Then, "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the 12 offshore accounts you don't know about. The consulting business I've been running for the past 6 years. The $47 million in liquid assets that you have absolutely no claim to." More silence. I could almost hear his mind working, trying to process the information. That's not possible. You haven't worked since Emma was born." "I haven't worked at Henderson Financial. That doesn't mean I haven't worked." "You're lying." "Ask your attorney. All the documentation is attached to the filing. You're welcome to verify it." "Vanessa, wait. Let's talk about this. We don't have to do it this way. We can work things out." "Like how you worked things out with Simone, in our daughter's nursery?" His breath caught. How long have you known?" "Long enough. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to protect myself and Emma. Long enough to discover exactly who I married." "Vanessa, please. I made a mistake. I can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Derek, stop. It's over. The papers are filed. The accounts are frozen. The house locks are changed. You can pick up your personal belongings next week by appointment. Your attorney will receive a list of times you can access the property with supervision." "With supervision? This is my house." "Actually, it's my house. I provided the down payment, remember? And you took out a line of credit against it without my knowledge or consent. That's going to be a problem for you in court." "This is insane. You're being crazy." "I'm being smart. Something I should have been 6 years ago when I signed that prenup without understanding exactly what I was agreeing to." I paused. "Actually, that's not quite true. I understood it perfectly. I just let you think I didn't." Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Cold, calculating. "You're going to regret this, Vanessa. I'll take everything. I'll make sure you end up with nothing. I have resources you don't understand." "No, Derek, you really don't. And that's the problem. That's always been the problem." I hung up. He tried calling back immediately, but I'd already blocked his number. All communication would go through the attorneys now. I sank onto Emma's bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals and picture books, and finally let myself cry. Not for Derek, or for the marriage I'd lost, but for the innocent version of myself who'd believed that love alone could sustain a partnership. For the woman who'd opened her heart and had it used as a weapon against her. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. At Emma's school. Taking her for ice cream before bringing her home. Give you time to collect yourself. I smiled through the tears. My mother always knew exactly what I needed. By the time Emma came home at 6, I'd showered, changed, and pulled myself together. She bounded through the door with chocolate ice cream on her face and threw herself into my arms. "Grandma got me 2 scoops," she announced proudly. Did she now? I glanced over her head at my mother, who just shrugged with a smile. "Special occasion," my mother mouthed silently. That night, I put Emma to bed and lay beside her until she fell asleep. Then I returned to my office, opened my laptop, and looked at everything Jonathan had sent me. The copies of the file documents, the temporary orders, the summary of what came next. There would be court dates and depositions, negotiations and financial disclosures, custody evaluations and parenting plans. It would be messy and difficult and sometimes painful, but I would survive it. I'd survived worse. The death of my father, my mother's painful divorces, the years of building a business while pretending I was just a housewife. I'd survived by being smarter, more prepared, more strategic than anyone expected. Derek had underestimated me from the moment we met. He'd seen what he wanted to see, a sweet, uncomplicated woman who needed him. Someone he could control and eventually discard when someone more exciting came along. He never saw the woman who'd learned at her father's knee how to read a balance sheet, who'd watched her mother lose everything 3 times and vowed it would never happen to her, who'd built an empire in secret and protected it with layers of legal structures that would take an army of attorneys to penetrate. I pulled up my secure banking portal one more time, looking at those numbers that represented years of careful work. $47 million that Derek had never known existed. And that was just the beginning. My phone buzzed with an email from Patricia. Derek's attorney requested an emergency hearing to contest the temporary orders. It's scheduled for Monday. They're claiming you've hidden assets and misrepresented your financial situation. I smiled. Let them try. They had no idea what they were up against. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable rain, the kind that turns Seattle's streets into mirrors reflecting gray skies. I dressed carefully for court, a navy suit that projected competence without arrogance, pearls my grandmother had left me, low heels that said I had nothing to prove. Emma had spent the weekend asking questions I'd answered as honestly as a 5-year-old could handle. Yes, Daddy and I were getting divorced. No, it wasn't her fault. Yes, she'd still see him. No, nothing would change how much we both loved her. My mother had stayed over both nights, a quiet presence that steadied me when the reality of it all threatened to overwhelm. Now she was taking Emma to school while I prepared to face Derek in court for the first time since filing. Jonathan met me outside the courthouse, his expression grave. Derek's attorney is Gerald Morrison. He's got a reputation for aggressive tactics and scorched earth litigation. He's going to try to paint you as manipulative and deceptive. I was deceptive, I said calmly. I hid assets. I maintained a secret business. Those are facts. Yes, but they're legal facts. Everything you did was within your rights under the prenup. Morrison's going to try to make the judge see you as someone who trapped Derek in a marriage under false pretenses, while ignoring that Derek was the one actually committing fraud and adultery. Exactly. Stay calm, answer only what's asked, and let me handle Morrison. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood-paneled and formal. Derek was already there with his attorney, and seeing him sent a jolt through my system. He looked terrible, unshaven, his suit wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. When our eyes met, his expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Pure hatred. Simone sat in the gallery behind him, her hand on his shoulder in a gesture of support that made my stomach turn. She was younger than I'd realized from the surveillance photos, maybe 28, with perfectly styled hair and designer clothes that screamed money she didn't actually have. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Kellerman presiding. Judge Kellerman was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the paperwork in front of her for what felt like an eternity before looking up. This is an emergency hearing on Mr. Hartley's motion to vacate the temporary orders issued Friday. Mr. Morrison, you may proceed. Gerald Morrison stood, and I immediately understood his reputation. He had the kind of presence that commanded attention, tall, silver-haired, with a voice that carried authority. Your Honor, my client was ambushed by divorce papers filed by his wife without warning or attempt at reconciliation. But more egregiously, Mrs. Hartley has perpetrated a massive fraud on this court and on Mr. Hartley by concealing approximately $47 million in assets while claiming to be a stay-at-home mother with no income. Judge Kellerman's eyebrow rose slightly. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Morrison. Indeed, Your Honor. Mrs. Hartley has been operating a secret consulting business for 6 years, while living off my client's income and claiming financial dependence. She has offshore accounts, multiple properties held through shell companies, and an investment portfolio worth tens of millions, all while her husband believed they were living on his salary alone. Mr. Reeves? Judge Kellerman turned to Jonathan. Your response? Jonathan stood with measured calm. Your Honor, there's no fraud here. Mrs. Hartley established her business before the marriage, as the prenuptial agreement explicitly allows. Every asset she's accumulated has been properly documented in separate accounts, also as the prenup requires. The fact that Mr. Hartley didn't ask about his wife's finances doesn't constitute fraud on her part. She lied to him, Morrison interrupted. She pretended to be someone she wasn't. Mr. Morrison, Judge Kellerman's voice was sharp. You'll address the court, not opposing counsel. Continue, Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Your Honor. The truth is, Mrs. Hartley never lied about her work. She simply didn't advertise it. Meanwhile, Mr. Hartley has been engaged in an extramarital affair for 18 months, during which time he embezzled over $300,000 from their joint accounts, took out an unauthorized line of credit against the marital home, and invested marital assets into his mistress's failing business venture. Morrison's face reddened. Those are inflammatory and unsubstantiated allegations. They're documented facts, Jonathan said smoothly, handing a folder to the bailiff. Bank statements, photographs, and witness testimony. all properly authenticated. Judge Kellerman reviewed the documents, her expression growing increasingly stern. Mr. Morrison, your client took out a $200,000 line of credit without his wife's knowledge or consent. The house is in both names, Your Honor. He had every right. Actually, he didn't. Jonathan produced another document. The deed clearly states that any liens, mortgages, or encumbrances require both signatures. Mr. Hartley forged his wife's signature on the loan documents. That's fraud, Your Honor. Actual, criminal fraud. The courtroom went silent. Derek leaned over to whisper urgently to Morrison, who waved him off impatiently. Is that true, Mr. Morrison? Judge Kellerman asked. Your Honor, my client was under financial pressure. That's not what I asked. Did he forge his wife's signature? Morrison's jaw worked. The signature may not have been properly obtained. May not have been properly obtained, Judge Kellerman repeated, her tone icy. That's one way to describe forgery. She turned to Derek directly. Mr. Hartley, do you have anything to say for yourself? Derek stood, and I could see him trying to summon the charm that had always worked for him before. Your Honor, I made a mistake. I was trying to make a good investment to benefit our family. I didn't think Vanessa would mind. You didn't think your wife would mind you forging her signature on a $200,000 loan? Judge Kellerman's voice could have cut glass. Or you didn't think she'd find out. Derek's charm evaporated. She was hiding millions from me. She's been lying about who she is since the day we met. I never lied, I said quietly before I could stop myself. Judge Kellerman looked at me. Mrs. Hartley? Jonathan put a hand on my arm in warning, but I stood anyway. Your Honor, I never lied to my husband about anything. He never asked about my work. He assumed I'd given it up, and I didn't correct that assumption because I'd learned from past relationships that financial independence made me a target rather than a partner. So you intentionally misled him, Morrison said triumphantly. I protected myself, I corrected. And given what he's done with our joint assets, money I contributed to equally, I was right to do so. Judge Kellerman studied me for a long moment. Mrs. Hartley, did you contribute financially to the household expenses during your marriage? Yes, Your Honor. Approximately 40% of all expenses came from accounts I controlled. I paid for Emma's preschool, our health insurance, most of our groceries, and utilities. I also provided the entire down payment for our home, $400,000 from my premarital assets. And Mr. Hartley was aware of these contributions? He knew I was paying for things. He never asked where the money came from. Because you told him it was from your family, Derek burst out. You said your mother helped us. I never said that, I replied evenly. You assumed it, and I let you assume it. There's a difference. Judge Kellerman held up a hand. Let me see if I understand the situation. Mrs. Hartley maintained separate finances as allowed by the prenuptial agreement. She contributed significantly to household expenses from those separate accounts. She never explicitly lied about the source of her income, though she didn't volunteer information about her business either. Meanwhile, Mr. Hartley embezzled from joint accounts, forged his wife's signature on loan documents, invested marital assets in his mistress's company, and conducted an affair for 18 months. Is that accurate? Your Honor, Morrison tried again. My client's personal failings don't negate the fact that Mrs. Hartley has been fundamentally dishonest. Mr. Morrison, I've practiced family law for 23 years. I've seen every variation of marital deception imaginable. but I've rarely seen a case where one party is trying to claim victimhood while simultaneously having committed forgery, adultery, and financial fraud. She looked at Derek with visible distaste. The temporary orders stand. Mrs. Hartley retains exclusive use of the marital home and primary custody of the minor child. All joint accounts remain frozen pending a full accounting of Mr. Hartley's withdrawals. Your Honor, my client will have no place to live, Morrison protested. I'm sure his mistress can accommodate him. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to seal Derek's fate. As we filed out of the courtroom, Derek caught my arm in the hallway. This isn't over, Vanessa. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll drag this out for years. I'll make sure you spend every dollar fighting me. I pulled my arm free. Derek, you're facing criminal charges for forging my signature. The state attorney general is investigating your theft from elderly clients. Novatech is collapsing and taking your investment with it. You're not in a position to threaten anyone. You're a vindictive bitch, he hissed. No, I said calmly. I'm just someone who prepared for the worst and hoped for the best. You're the one who chose the worst. Simone appeared beside him, her expression less confident than it had been in the courtroom. Come on, baby, let's go. I watched them walk away, Derek's shoulders slumped in defeat, and felt nothing but relief. That went better than expected, Jonathan said, joining me. Kellerman clearly saw through Morrison's theatrics. What happens now? Now we negotiate. Derek's attorney will push for a settlement. They can't risk going to trial with this evidence. We'll work out custody arrangements, property division, and child support. Given his income and the fact that you have primary custody, he'll owe you support for Emma even though you don't need it financially. I don't want his money. It's not about want. It's about Emma's rights. That money goes into a trust for her future. Over the following weeks, the full scope of Derek's actions came to light. The state attorney general's investigation revealed he'd stolen over $400,000 from 9 different clients, mostly elderly individuals who trusted him with their retirement savings. Rebecca Lynn's testimony, combined with the documentation she'd provided, made the case airtight. Derek was arrested on a Tuesday morning, charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. The news made the local papers. Local financial advisor charged in scheme to defraud elderly clients. Henderson Financial immediately terminated him and began the process of making their clients whole, though the damage to their reputation was severe. Several employees, including Rebecca's supervisor who'd ignored her warnings, were also fired. Novatech Solutions collapsed exactly as Patricia had predicted, taking Derek's $150,000 investment with it. Simone disappeared overnight, leaving behind debts and angry investors. The authorities were still looking for her when Derek's criminal trial began. I didn't attend the trial. Jonathan handled all the divorce negotiations, while Derek's criminal attorney tried desperately to work out a plea deal. In the end, Derek pleaded guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence: 5 years in federal prison, restitution to his victims, and permanent revocation of his financial licenses. The divorce was finalized 3 months after I'd filed. Derek signed the papers from jail, agreeing to everything. I got the house, full legal and physical custody of Emma, and all marital assets after repaying his debts. He got supervised visitation with Emma once she was old enough to decide if she wanted it, and the requirement to pay child support even from prison. Emma took it better than I'd feared. Children are resilient, and with my mother's help and a wonderful child therapist, she adjusted to our new normal. She asked about Derek sometimes, and I answered honestly but gently. He'd made bad choices. He was facing consequences. But he still loved her, even if he'd shown that love poorly. 6 months after the divorce was final, I was in my home office when Emma bounded in with a drawing. "Look, Mommy, I made our family." The picture showed 2 figures, one tall with dark hair, me, one small with pigtails, Emma, standing in front of a house with a big sun overhead. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." "Where should we hang it?" "On the fridge, next to the one Grandma liked." As she ran off to place it herself, I returned to my laptop. Meridian Strategic Advisors had just landed its biggest contract yet, a multinational pharmaceutical merger worth $2.3 billion. My cut would be substantial, but more than the money, I felt the satisfaction of doing work I loved on my own terms. My phone rang. Jonathan's number. "Vanessa, I wanted to give you an update. Derek's restitution payments are being processed. His victims are being made whole." "That's good news." "There's something else. Rebecca Lynn asked if she could meet with you. She wants to thank you personally for supporting her testimony." "Of course. Give her my number." After we hung up, I sat for a moment thinking about how far I'd come. A year ago, I'd been watching my husband kiss another woman on a baby monitor, feeling my world crumble. Now I was raising my daughter alone. Yes, but on my own terms, with my own resources, and with the freedom to be fully myself. My mother had been right, all those years ago. Financial independence wasn't just about money. It was about having choices, about not being trapped by someone else's decisions or deceptions. That evening, I took Emma out for ice cream, our new Friday tradition. As we sat in the shop, she with chocolate chip and me with vanilla, I watched her swing her legs happily and thought about the lessons I'd teach her as she grew. I'd teach her to be kind, but not naive, trusting, but not foolish, to love with an open heart, but protect herself with a clear head. Most importantly, I'd teach her that her worth wasn't dependent on anyone else, not a partner, not a parent, not society's expectations. "Mommy?" Emma asked, chocolate smeared on her chin. "Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? I'd been betrayed, divorced, and thrust into single parenthood. My daughter's father was in prison. My marriage had been a lie. But I looked at Emma's sweet face, at the life we were building together, at the freedom I'd fought for and won. I thought about my business, my mother's proud smile, the house that was truly mine, and the future I could create on my own terms. "Yes, baby," I said, and meant it. "I'm happy." "Me too," she said simply, and returned to her ice cream. 2 years after the divorce, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Derek, forwarded through Jonathan's office as required by the custody agreement. "Dear Vanessa, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, about who I was, and about how badly I failed you and Emma. You were right about everything. I was arrogant and selfish. I saw you as someone I could control rather than a partner to respect. I convinced myself I deserved more than what we had, never realizing that what we had was everything I should have wanted. I've been taking business ethics classes here, which is probably ironic given why I'm here, but I'm trying to understand how I became someone capable of stealing from elderly people who trusted me. How I became someone capable of treating you the way I did. I know Emma's doing well. My mother sends me photos sometimes. She looks happy, healthy. That's because of you. You're giving her everything I should have helped provide. Stability, love, honesty. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking you to bring Emma to visit, or to reconsider the custody arrangement, or to respond to this letter. I just wanted you to know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and losing you was entirely my fault. I hope you're happy, Vanessa. You deserve happiness. Derek, I read the letter twice, then filed it away in the folder I kept for Emma's future. Someday, when she was old enough to understand, she could read it and decide for herself what kind of relationship she wanted with her father. As for me, I'd stopped being angry months ago. Anger was exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. Like the new project I was developing, a non-profit foundation to help women achieve financial independence. It would offer free financial literacy classes, business mentoring, and seed funding for women-owned startups. I was calling it the Charlotte Foundation, after my grandmother who'd taught my mother to always have running away money. The foundation's mission statement was simple. No woman should ever be trapped by financial dependence. I'd already recruited Patricia as the CFO and hired 3 other consultants. We were planning to launch in 6 months, with a focus on women leaving abusive relationships or going through divorce. It felt like the right way to channel everything I'd learned, everything I'd survived, into something that could help others. One evening, as I was reviewing foundation documents, Emma wandered in wearing her pajamas. "Mommy, Sophia's daddy is getting married again. Will you get married again?" I considered the question carefully. Maybe someday, but right now I'm happy with just us. "Me too," she said, climbing into my lap. "But if you do get married again, make sure he's nice to me." "Oh, sweetheart." I hugged her tight. "That's the first thing I'd check. And make sure he doesn't lie." "Definitely." "And make sure he likes ice cream." I laughed. "Obviously. That's non-negotiable." She giggled and hugged me back, and in that moment, I realized something profound. I'd thought I was protecting myself by hiding my success from Derek, but I'd really been hiding myself, my ambition, my capabilities, my full self. Never again. The next man I let into my life, if there ever was a next man, would know exactly who I was from day one. My success, my wealth, my strength. If that intimidated him, he wasn't the right person. If he felt threatened by it, he could leave. If he tried to take it from me, he'd learn the same lesson Derek had. But there was time for all that later. For now, I had a daughter to raise, a business to run, a foundation to launch, and a life to live on my own terms. 3 years after filing for divorce, I stood in front of a room full of women at the Charlotte Foundation's first workshop. They were survivors all, of abuse, of financial control, of relationships that had trapped them. "My name is Vanessa," I began, "and 5 years ago, I watched my husband kiss another woman on a baby monitor while he told her I'd be broke after our divorce." The women leaned forward, recognition in their eyes. They'd all been underestimated, all been told they were powerless. He thought I was dependent on him. He thought I had nothing. What he didn't know was that I had $47 million in offshore accounts he'd never discovered. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. "But here's what I want you to understand," I continued. "The money was important. It gave me options, freedom, security. But what really saved me wasn't the money. It was the decision I'd made years earlier to never let anyone else control my financial future. That decision led to the savings, the investments, the business. But it started with a choice. I looked at each face, seeing myself reflected back in their determined expressions. You're here because you're making that choice now. Some of you are leaving marriages. Some are leaving abusive partners. Some are just tired of depending on someone else. Whatever brought you here, you've already taken the hardest step, deciding you deserve better. What if we don't have millions? A woman in the back asked. What if we're starting from nothing? Then you start from nothing, I said simply. That's where my mother started, 3 times. She taught me that independence isn't about the amount. It's about the principle. You save what you can, even if it's $5 a week. You learn what you can, even if it's from free online courses. You build what you can, even if it's slowly. The point is, you build something that's yours, that no one can take from you. For the next 2 hours, I taught them what I knew. How to open bank accounts their partners couldn't access. How to establish credit in their own names. How to document assets and protect themselves legally. Patricia taught them to read financial statements and spot financial abuse. A lawyer from our network taught them about prenups and postnups and community property. But more than information, I hoped we gave them something else. The belief that they could do this. That they were capable, strong, and deserving of financial security. As the women filed out, several stopped to thank me, to share their stories, to ask follow-up questions. One woman, probably in her 50s with kind eyes and nervous hands, lingered until everyone else had left. Mrs. Hartley, I just wanted to say, my daughter married a man like your ex-husband. She won't leave him because she thinks she can't afford to. Could you maybe talk to her? I squeezed her hand. Give her our information. Tell her we offer free consultations. No judgment, no pressure. Just options. Thank you, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Thank you for doing this. After she left, I stood alone in the empty conference room, looking at the whiteboards covered in financial formulas and legal terms. This was my legacy now, not the millions I'd accumulated, but the knowledge I could share, the women I could help, the cycles I could break. Emma was 7 now, thriving in 2nd grade, taking piano lessons and soccer practice. She barely remembered life with Derek, which was both sad and merciful. He'd written a few more letters over the years, always forwarded through Jonathan. I kept them all for her, but I never responded. Derek would be released from prison in 2 years. His mother had hinted that he hoped to be part of Emma's life then, to rebuild some kind of relationship. I'd cross that bridge when we came to it, prioritizing Emma's well-being above all else. As for Simone, she'd been arrested in Mexico 6 months after fleeing, charged with securities fraud for Novatech. She was serving her own sentence now, though in a different facility. I didn't follow her case. She was Derek's problem, not mine. I packed up my materials and headed home, where my mother was watching Emma. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Mrs. Hartley, this is Rebecca Lynn. I wanted you to know, I just got promoted to senior accountant at a new firm. They valued my integrity in coming forward about the Henderson situation. Thank you for supporting me when it mattered. I hope I can pay it forward someday. I smiled and typed back, Congratulations, Rebecca. You earned that promotion. And you're already paying it forward by being someone younger employees can trust. Driving home through the evening traffic, I reflected on how profoundly life had changed. 5 years ago, I'd been trapped in a marriage built on deception, hiding who I was to avoid conflict. Now I was fully myself, successful businesswoman, single mother, nonprofit founder, and survivor. Was it the life I'd imagined at 25, standing at an altar promising forever to a man I thought I knew? No. But it was better than the alternative. Staying silent, staying small, staying dependent on someone who valued me so little. Emma ran to greet me at the door, waving a paper with a gold star. "Mommy, I got perfect on my math test." "That's my brilliant girl." I scooped her up, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "Should we celebrate with your favorite dinner?" "Pizza." "Obviously pizza." As we cooked together, Emma carefully arranging pepperoni while I rolled out dough, my mother sat at the kitchen counter watching us with a satisfied smile. "You've built a good life," she said quietly. "We've built a good life," I corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have. You're stronger than you know." I learned from the best. Emma looked up from her pepperoni arrangement. "Grandma, did you get divorced too?" My mother didn't flinch. "3 times, sweetheart." "That's a lot." "It is. But each time I learned something important. And each time I made sure I could take care of myself and your mother." "Is that why Mommy has her own money?" "Exactly why." Emma nodded seriously, as if storing this information for future use. "When I grow up, I'm going to have my own money too. And a big office like Mommy's. And maybe a husband. But only if he's really, really nice and doesn't lie." My mother and I exchanged glances over her head, both fighting smiles. "That sounds like an excellent plan," I said. That night, after Emma was asleep and my mother had gone home, I sat in my office one last time reviewing the day's work. The foundation was thriving. My consulting business was stronger than ever, and Emma was happy and healthy. I opened the secure banking portal I'd looked at that night 5 years ago when I'd first discovered Derek's affair. The number was higher now, $53.8 million, thanks to successful investments and continued business growth. But the number itself mattered less than what it represented: freedom, security, and the power to help others achieve the same. I thought about the woman Derek had been talking to on that baby monitor, the one he'd told I'd be broke after the divorce. In a way, I owed him thanks. His betrayal had forced me to stop hiding, to step fully into my power, to use what I'd built for something meaningful. Without his deception, I might have continued playing small, pretending to be less than I was. Without his cruelty, I might never have found the courage to help other women avoid my mistakes. So yes, in a strange way, I was grateful. Not for the pain, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but for the transformation that pain had forced me to undergo, for the strength I'd discovered when I had no choice but to be strong, for the clarity that came from surviving something I'd thought would destroy me. I closed the laptop and turned off the lights, walking through my house, mine and Emma's, with a profound sense of peace. Derek had thought he could leave me with nothing. Instead, he'd left me with everything that mattered: my daughter, my dignity, my freedom, and a future built on my own terms. The offshore accounts were nice, but those weren't what saved me. What saved me was the decision I'd made long ago to never let anyone else define my worth, control my future, or limit my potential. That was something no prenup could protect, no divorce could threaten, and no betrayal could take away. It was mine, and it always would be. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.